You close your eyes, but sleep doesn't come. Your mind races with tomorrow's worries, yesterday's regrets, and today's unfinished prayers. You reach for your rosary with tired fingers, wondering if God notices when exhaustion wins over devotion. Does he see you struggling to stay awake for one more Hail Mary? Does he understand when your words fade into silence before the final prayer? Tonight, you're not alone in this spiritual battle. Across centuries, countless souls have faced this same tender struggle between the body's need for rest and the heart's desire to pray. You hold your rosary, feeling its familiar weight, knowing that something sacred happens when weary hands clasp these blessed beads. But what exactly unfolds in the heavenly realm when you drift into sleep while praying? Saint Teresa of Avila, the great mystic and doctor of the Church, discovered something profound about this intimate moment between prayer and sleep. Through her deep spiritual experiences and divine revelations, she learned that falling asleep while praying the Rosary is not a failure of devotion, but rather a beautiful surrender that touches the very heart of God. Her teachings reveal why this simple act of faithful exhaustion becomes a source of divine pleasure. The mystery begins here, in this sacred space between wakefulness and dreams, where your last conscious thoughts become a bridge to eternity. Are you ready to discover why God smiles upon the soul that falls asleep with Mary's prayers on their lips? Tonight, everything you thought you knew about prayer and rest is about to be transformed. Your eyelids grow heavy as you whisper the familiar words, Hail Mary, full of grace. Each bead feels more difficult to grasp than the last. Your voice becomes a whisper, then barely a breath. You fight to stay conscious, to honor your evening promise to Our Lady, but your human weakness seems to betray your spiritual intentions. Have you ever felt like your love for God was being measured by your ability to stay awake? This internal conflict creates a storm within your soul. On one side stands your sincere desire to pray, to end your day in communion with the divine. On the other side presses the undeniable weight of human fatigue, pulling you toward the rest your body desperately needs. You wonder if giving into sleep means failing in your devotion, if closing your eyes during prayer signals a lack of true commitment to your faith. But Saint Teresa understood this struggle intimately. In her own words, she taught that God does not measure perfection by the quantity of words, but by the faithfulness of love. She discovered through her profound mystical experiences that the soul's sincere intention carries more weight in heaven than our physical ability to remain alert. When you pick up that rosary despite your exhaustion, you're already demonstrating a love that conquers weakness. The tension you feel in this moment between wanting to pray and needing to rest is not a sign of spiritual failure. It's actually the beginning of something beautiful. Saint Teresa revealed that God sees the heart that struggles to love even when the body can no longer cooperate. This struggle itself becomes a prayer, a silent testimony of devotion that echoes in the chambers of eternity. Your very exhaustion becomes an offering when placed in Mary's hands. When you fall asleep while praying the Rosary, something extraordinary happens in the spiritual realm. According to Saint Teresa's teachings, you don't simply drift into unconsciousness. You nestle into the loving embrace of the Mother of God herself. She taught that whoever surrenders to prayer is like a child in the arms of their mother. This isn't merely poetic language. It's a spiritual reality that unfolds each time you release your grip on consciousness while holding your rosary. The rosary becomes an invisible cord connecting your heart to Mary's Immaculate Heart. While your body surrenders to rest, your soul remains sheltered beneath her maternal mantle. Saint Padre Pio, whose own devotion to the rosary was legendary, often said, "Whoever holds the rosary is holding Mary's hand." When sleep overtakes you during prayer, Mary doesn't withdraw her hand. She holds yours more tenderly, continuing the conversation your lips can no longer maintain. Saint Teresa of Lisieux beautifully expressed this truth. With each Hail Mary, heaven draws a little closer to earth. Your sleeping form, rosary still entwined in your fingers, becomes a living testament to this divine proximity. Mary watches over your slumber, protecting you from nightmares and temptations, transforming your rest into a prolonged prayer. You sleep not alone, but in the company of the Queen of Heaven herself. This divine protection extends beyond mere comfort. Saint Teresa revealed that when we fall asleep praying to Mary, we experience what John experienced when he rested upon Christ's chest at the Last Supper, an intimate closeness to divine love that transcends our conscious awareness. Your bedroom becomes a holy place, your pillow a sacred altar where Mary keeps vigil through the night. In this state, you're not just sleeping, you're resting in the very bosom of divine tenderness. Call to action. Write in the comments, "Mary watches over my sleep," if you want to experience this divine protection tonight, and subscribe to receive more of Saint Teresa's spiritual wisdom. Have you ever considered that your struggle to stay awake during prayer might actually be more pleasing to God than perfect alertness? Saint Teresa discovered a profound truth. When exhaustion battles against devotion and devotion wins, even for just a moment, that victory has eternal weight. God doesn't despise the soul that fights against fatigue to utter one more prayer. Rather, he reads this struggle as the purest form of love. The Catechism teaches us that true prayer is a battle of faith, CCC 2732, and sometimes this battle is fought against sleep, distraction, and physical weakness. But God doesn't measure victory by our ability to complete every decade perfectly. He measures it by the heart that refuses to surrender its desire to love Him, even when the body can no longer cooperate. Your drooping eyelids become a battlefield where love proves stronger than human limitation. Saint Teresa taught that even when the will cannot act, desire pleases the Lord. This means that when your lips can no longer form the words of the Hail Mary, but your heart still yearns to pray, heaven receives that unspoken intention as a complete prayer. Mary herself completes each Ave Maria that you cannot finish, presenting your loving intention to her Son as if it were perfectly pronounced. Think about this moment. You're holding your rosary, fighting sleep, whispering prayers that become fainter and fainter until they exist only in your heart. This isn't failure, it's the most human and beautiful form of perseverance. Saint Teresa called this love that prays beyond words, a communion so pure that it continues even when consciousness fades. God smiles at the child who falls asleep trying to love Him, seeing in that struggle the very essence of faithful devotion. As your consciousness fades and the rosary slips from your relaxed fingers, does prayer truly end? Saint Teresa's mystical experiences revealed a breathtaking truth. When you fall asleep while praying the rosary, the prayer doesn't cease. It transforms. The heavenly realm takes over where your human effort left off, creating a continuation of prayer that surpasses anything your conscious mind could achieve. The spiritual tradition teaches that angels continue our prayers when we fall asleep in devotion. Saints Gertrude and Faustina wrote extensively about this mysterious communion between the sleeping soul and heaven. Your unfinished rosary becomes a bridge that angels use to carry your intentions directly to the throne of God. Every bead you didn't reach, every prayer you couldn't complete, finds its fulfillment in the celestial choir that never sleeps. Saint Teresa affirmed that when God finds a heart turned toward Him, even rest becomes prayer. Your sleeping form, rosary nearby, transforms into a living prayer that continues throughout the night. The Holy Spirit, dwelling within you, maintains that conversation with God even when your conscious mind cannot participate. Your very breathing becomes a rhythm of praise, your peaceful countenance a silent hallelujah. Padre Pio beautifully expressed this reality. Mary receives prayers interrupted by sleep like flowers falling into her lap. She gathers each unfinished Ave Maria, each incomplete Glory Be, and weaves them into a perfect bouquet of prayer that she presents to her Son. God, who sees the secrets of every heart, Matthew 6:6, transforms your restful sleep into continuous praise. You close your eyes attempting to pray, and you awaken having prayed all night through the ministry of angels and the intercession of Mary. What happens in the spiritual realm when your last conscious prayer dissolves into peaceful sleep? Saint Teresa's profound understanding of mystical theology reveals that your falling asleep doesn't interrupt divine communication. It opens a new channel for it. The third reason why God delights in souls who sleep while praying the rosary is that heaven itself continues the conversation you began, creating an unbroken chain of prayer that spans from earth to eternity. When you surrender to sleep while holding your rosary, you're essentially handing over your prayer intentions to the entire heavenly court. The angels who constantly stand before God's throne receive your unspoken requests and present them with perfect clarity. Saints who once walked your same earthly path intercede for you with understanding born from their own human struggles. Mary, as Queen of Heaven and Earth, coordinates this celestial symphony of prayer on your behalf. This isn't merely beautiful imagery, it's a theological reality rooted in the communion of saints. Saint Teresa experienced this mystical truth firsthand, understanding that our individual prayers become part of the Church's eternal liturgy. When you fall asleep praying, your personal rosary joins the endless rosary being prayed in heaven, where time has no meaning and prayer never ceases. Your bedroom becomes connected to the celestial throne room through the invisible threads of faith and devotion. The beauty of this divine arrangement is that it requires nothing from you except surrender. You don't need to stay awake to participate in this heavenly prayer. You simply need to trust that God's love continues to work even when your conscious effort ends. Saint Teresa taught that God's grace accomplishes more in our surrender than in our striving. Your peaceful sleep becomes a perfect act of trust, allowing divine love to pray through you in ways your waking mind could never achieve. Your rosary is more than a string of beads. It's a spiritual bridge connecting your earthly bedroom to the throne room of God. Saint Teresa understood that each bead represents not just a prayer, but a step closer to divine intimacy. When you fall asleep while praying, that bridge remains active, allowing grace to flow in both directions throughout the night. Have you ever awakened feeling mysteriously peaceful after falling asleep with your rosary, sensing that something sacred occurred while you slept? This mystical bridge operates on principles beyond human understanding. Each Hail Mary you pray before sleep becomes a light that illuminates the path between earth and heaven. The mysteries you contemplate create windows through which divine grace can enter your soul more fully. When consciousness fades, these spiritual connections don't weaken. They strengthen as the distractions of wakefulness give way to the pure receptivity of peaceful rest. Saint Teresa taught that the rosary creates what she called chambers of prayer within the soul. Each decade opens a new room where God can dwell more intimately. When you fall asleep praying, these chambers remain open all night, allowing Christ to move freely through the interior castle of your heart. Your sleeping soul becomes like the locked garden in the Song of Songs, where the beloved walks in the cool of the evening, bringing peace to every corner of your being. The physical rosary in your hands serves as an anchor for this spiritual reality. Even as sleep relaxes your grip, the invisible connection remains unbroken. Mary continues to count each prayer that your heart intended to say, each mystery your soul longed to contemplate. Morning comes not with the guilt of unfinished prayer, but with the joy of a night spent in divine communion. You fell asleep attempting to reach heaven, and heaven reached down to embrace you in return. When you choose to end your day by reaching for your rosary instead of immediately surrendering to sleep, you transform ordinary rest into something sacred. Saint Teresa revealed that this simple choice, to begin praying even when exhausted, elevates your entire night into a holy offering. Your bed becomes an altar, your sleep becomes worship, and your dreams become conversations with eternity. This transformation doesn't require perfection or even completion of your intended prayers. The moment you touch your rosary with the intention to pray, grace begins to work. Saint Teresa taught that God desires our intention more than our ability, meaning that your sincere desire to pray carries more weight in heaven than your capacity to stay awake through all 5 decades. The very act of choosing prayer over immediate rest demonstrates a love that God finds irresistible. Consider how this changes everything about your relationship with sleep. No longer is rest merely a biological necessity or a temporary escape from daily pressures. When you fall asleep while praying the rosary, rest becomes a form of prayer itself. Your breathing becomes a rhythm of trust, your peaceful countenance becomes a smile toward heaven, and your dreams become meetings with the divine. You don't just sleep, you rest in God. Saint Teresa experienced this transformation personally, describing nights when sleep felt like drowning in divine love. She learned that when we approach rest with prayer, we don't lose consciousness. We gain a different kind of awareness, one that operates beyond the limitations of waking thought. Your sleeping form continues to radiate the prayer you began, like incense that continues to rise long after the fire has burned low. This is why God delights in souls who fall asleep praying. They turn rest itself into worship. You awaken to sunlight streaming through your window, and something feels different. Your rosary lies beside you, a silent witness to the night's sacred journey. There's a peace in your heart that wasn't there when you first closed your eyes, a sense that something beautiful happened while you slept. This is the fruit of sleeping while praying the Rosary. You rise not just physically refreshed, but spiritually renewed. Saint Teresa taught that souls who fall asleep in prayer often awaken with increased clarity about God's will for their lives. During the night, while your conscious mind rested, your spirit remained open to divine inspiration. Mary, who watched over your sleep, whispered wisdom into your heart in ways that bypassed the noise of daily distractions. You may find that problems that seemed overwhelming the night before now have clearer solutions, or that anxieties that kept you awake have mysteriously dissolved. This morning blessing isn't accidental. It's the natural result of spending the night in Mary's care. She is the woman who pondered all things in her heart, Luke 2:51, and she shares this gift of contemplative wisdom with those who entrust their rest to her protection. Your dreams may have been filled with peace, your sleep undisturbed by anxieties, because you fell asleep under the mantle of the Queen of Peace. The grace received during prayer-filled sleep continues to work throughout the following day. You may notice increased patience with difficult people, clearer perception of what truly matters, or a deeper sense of God's presence in ordinary moments. Saint Teresa promised that whoever sleeps praying awakens blessed, and this blessing extends far beyond the moment of waking. Your entire day becomes illuminated by the grace received during the night, proving that falling asleep while praying the Rosary is never time wasted, but time transformed into eternal treasure. As we conclude this sacred teaching from Saint Teresa, let the full weight of this truth settle into your heart. Your simple act of falling asleep while praying the Rosary carries eternal significance. In God's eyes, your struggle against fatigue to whisper one more Hail Mary holds more value than the most eloquent prayers spoken by those who feel no effort. Your humble surrender to sleep while holding Mary's hand pleases the Trinity more than any display of spiritual achievement. Saint Teresa revealed that God treasures these moments of vulnerable devotion because they reflect the very essence of faith, trust in divine love that surpasses human understanding. When you fall asleep praying, you demonstrate the ultimate act of abandonment to God's will. You're saying without words, Lord, I give you my consciousness, my dreams, my rest, and my entire night. Do with them what pleases you most. This surrender opens your soul to graces that could never be earned through mere effort. Tonight, when fatigue begins to settle over you, don't apologize to God for your human limitations. Instead, reach for your Rosary with confidence, knowing that Mary is already preparing to take over where your strength ends. Begin your prayers with the trust that completion isn't your responsibility. Faithfulness is. Whether you finish all 5 decades or fall asleep on the first mystery, your intention to pray has already been received in heaven as a perfect offering. Remember this truth as you lie down to rest. The Rosary you hold connects you to an unbroken chain of prayer that spans centuries and reaches into eternity. Saints who walked before you fell asleep praying these same mysteries. Angels who never tire continue the Hail Marys you cannot finish. Mary herself keeps vigil beside your bed, presenting your sleeping heart to her Son as a living prayer. In this beautiful communion of love, your simple act of falling asleep while praying becomes a note in heaven's eternity.